welcome to a new show of In Depth. I'm your host, Rick Morelli. Recently, there have been some major changes to the Hazleton Area School District safety program. Had to do with the metal detectors, had to do with security guards, had to do with the police in the schools. Caused some concerns, which it should, and there's some questions out there. Tonight, I have two individuals here to set the story straight as to what is taking place in the Hazleton Area School District. To my far left, a gentleman who a lot of people know. He used to be the former chief of police here in the city of Hazleton. He also was the chief of police in Montgomery, and he is now head of security in the Hazleton Area School District, Mr. Ed Harry. And to my immediate left, a good friend of mine. He used to be head of security years ago with the Hazleton Area School District, and now is the vice president of the school board, Mr. Vinnie Zola. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Hi, Rick.
Good evening.
I appreciate you coming on here. And again, this is one of those typical situations which it's a legitimate issue when you make change. People don't like change, and unfortunately, sometimes the information getting out to the public, to the parents, doesn't always get out there. So I thought it'd be a good show to talk about the changes that are taking place in the school district. Obviously, we're dealing with not only the individuals, but most importantly, the kids. So let me start it off with Vinnie, yourself, as to what is taking place. Tell the public what's true, what's not.
Well, I think first of all, we need to expel the rumor that we're removing the metal detectors from the schools, that we're not using them. That's not true. We are changing the way that we're going to use the metal detectors. And I'm going to let Chief Harry talk about that a little bit. But the metal detectors will be part of our security plan, and they will be in every school. They still remain at the front doors, but we're going to use them in a different approach.
Right.
And that's positive.
So they're not going away. They're going to be there, but they're not going to be there all the time, right?
Correct.
Yeah, they're not going to be used constantly, but they will be there and used when necessary and when it fits into the plan.
So why is that better, and how is that going to help make the security better?
Any security solutions that you put into place have to be fluid. You're always changing your security based on the threats that are present. And security is always fluid. Security and law enforcement's always fluid. You don't put a plan in place and it just stays that way. Because what happens is people who want to defeat those plans find a way around it. And that's why you're constantly adapting to the ways that people find to get around your security. And the analogy that I always use with people to try and explain it is that your computer has antivirus software. And what happens every week and a half, 2 weeks, you see an update to your antivirus software. And the reason for that is because threats are always changing, so you have to update it. So we're simply changing our security procedures based on what's currently going on in the schools and the threats that we have to protect our students and staff against.
So you're being proactive, and Vinnie, we've worked together, and we'll tell some stories later on of some of the things we've done when I was on the school board, but you're being proactive here, and you're saying that the metal detectors, they worked or they didn't work as good as we thought they would. I mean, I think that's something that's...
I think the metal detectors have a very specific purpose. And they're designed to be used, if you go to an airport, they're used in a manner where they could take their time. If they need to screen you, if they need to run a person through 2-3 times or remove them, run them through and then remove them to a separate area and search them, that's what they'll do. So whatever it takes to stop a person from bringing a weapon beyond that point in an airport is what they do. But once you're in that secured area, then you no longer have access to the outside where you can bring a weapon in or do something like that. So in a school district, for us to run 1,000 students through a metal detector in any type of timely fashion just doesn't work. Metal detectors, and we have very good metal detectors. They're Garrett, they're great tools, but in between each student, they need a few seconds to recalibrate. You have to be able to recalibrate them. If the student that passes through sets an alarm off, that student has to be checked on the opposite side, then brought around again to run through the metal detector again. And when I stand there and watch them using the metal detectors, 4 out of 5 kids beep. And what's happening now is they beep, they look, oh, it's your belt buckle, go ahead. Oh, it's your...
Well, the detectors are only as good as the security who are there. I
Exactly.
mean, we've been through where people,
Yep.
they just brush through you and it's like, you really didn't check anything. So that's one thing. And I believe we were talking earlier, it takes about 4 people for every metal detector. So you're now taking these individuals and they're going to be in the hallways. And so, I mean, I'm looking at it and saying, all right, if I know you don't have a metal detector, it's easier for me to bring in a gun or a knife. And I think that's a fair comment. How, if that can't take place, how are people walking the hallways? How's that going to help things be better? And
Well, I think, again, it's not that we won't be using metal detectors. It's how we're going to be using the metal detectors. So the truth of the matter is, I would say in the last 3 months, I know of at least 4 different weapons that got through the metal detectors. And they were all knives of one sort or another. But they did. They got through the metal detectors. And the way we find them is by one student telling someone else or someone seeing it and reporting it. And that's the biggest tool that we have is other people, you know, making sure that our students realize and know that if you hear someone talking about a threat or a weapon or anything like that, you need to get out there. You need to let a teacher know. You need to let security know. You need to let the police officer know, because that's usually the first indication that there's a problem.
right. And so again, go back to the security in the hallways and the police that we now have too. I like to talk about the police force. I mean, it's more than just moving the metal detectors and using them differently, right? There's more of a plan here.
Absolutely.
What else?
Here's the problem, and we use the airports for an example. Like Vinnie said, once you go through the metal detector, now you're in a secured area. Okay, you're in a secured area of the airport, you're getting on an airplane, there's no doors, windows, there's nowhere that you can bring weapons in. Think of a school. Once you go through that metal detector, now you're in a school, but how many windows are there? How many doors are there? There's nobody walking around checking these doors, checking these hallways, checking these windows. If you want to bring a weapon in there, you can get a weapon in that school very easily. What we need our people, our security and police officers, to be walking in the hallways, not tied to that front door. And right now, they're tied to the front door. We have threats that are in our schools right now. We have incidents taking place. They're taking place in the hallways. They're taking place in the classroom because everybody knows all of our security people are at the front desk. And once you get into the school, you kind of had, I don't want to say a free reign, but that's pretty much what it is. What we want to do is get our officers off the front desk and into the hallways. We want them patrolling, just like you want police officers patrolling the municipality that you live in. You don't want them all sitting at the police station. You want them patrolling your neighborhoods. And we look at the schools like a city, and this is a neighborhood, and you want the officers out patrolling the neighborhoods. The flip side of that, too, is now the officers are getting to know the kids. They can't do that when they're sitting at the front desk. They build a relationship with the students. They build a relationship with the staff. Now kids get to know them, they get to trust the officers that are in their schools, and if there is a weapon in a school, if there is a threat that's being made, they're more apt to go to these officers and tell them what's going on. And that, I think, is much more important than having them tied to the front desk.
Now again, granted, both you gentlemen have clearly a lot more experience when it comes to law enforcement and security than I do, and as well as many of the other people out there who are probably challenging you. But when you say that, okay, most people at the front door earlier on, I'm thinking, okay, I understand that earlier when school's coming in, but as the kids go back to their classes, you probably don't need as 4 people to go through security. I mean, I've seen them when we're at the courthouse, you have 1 person, 2 maybe. So isn't that an argument to still keep the metal detectors there and then disperse your people, as well as maybe even hire more people? Is that something? I mean, we know about the cost of it all, and that plays in another factor, and that's certainly something that you could throw back to people to say, hey, if you want both, that's something that you have to look at as well. Right?
Rick, you could always throw money at a problem. Right. And our district is famous for that. We throw money at a problem and you know, that's going to resolve it. But it never does. Buying metal detectors the way they did. We started, metal detectors aren't new in the district. Yeah. We started metal detectors probably 20 odd years ago. Yeah. I was in charge of security at the time when we purchased the first metal detector, and the outcry was, as you remember, Rick, you're turning our schools into prisons. What are you doing?
Sure.
I mean, I can remember the school board had me at a public meeting, and they were roasting me like, well, what do you're turning our school district into a prison. But the purpose of the metal detector then and now is it's one part of our security system. It's a tool in our toolbox. And we don't want people to get, and what's happening truly in our schools, everyone has the mindset, we have a police officer at the front door, we have a metal detector, we're safe, we don't have to do anything else. So you get a false sense of security. And truly, security in a school district, in any school building, it's everyone. It's the teachers, it's the principal, it's the janitors, it's the cafeteria ladies. Everyone plays a role in securing that school. How? Well, just making sure that classroom doors are closed during the day while you're teaching. And someone might say, well, why? What's the sense of that? Because if someone does get into a building and they're in a hallway, the best thing to do is make sure if your door is closed, that person's not going to be able to walk right into your classroom and use your classroom as their setting.
Real quick here before we take a break,
Yes.
there have been some other schools, obviously, and the one thing we are always fearful is that shooting. And knock on wood, our school district has not had anything like that, but the schools that have done, did they have metal detectors? What were some of the holes what happened with
Every
them?
school shooting that we've had in this country, metal detectors wouldn't have done anything for it. And I'll give the perfect example is Newtown, which is probably one of the worst ones. And the person who did that shooting shot his way through the front door. So obviously a metal detector isn't going to do any good. And if you have your only person who's armed in that school sitting at the front door, he's their first target. And this has happened in schools where the person at the front door, whether it's a police officer, was the first one shot. So you can't, and again, I'll go back to even, let's point out 9/11. Okay, those hijackers went through metal detectors and went through stringent security screening, and they were still able to get in with weapons and hijack these planes. So again, it gives people a false sense of security, and what happens is they're not paying attention to things they should be paying attention to because they think they don't have to. Yep. And it's just like in a community, again, I keep going back to that analogy, but you have crime watch groups. Like Vinnie said, everybody's a part of the security. It's just like you watch out in your neighborhood. If you see something that doesn't belong, you're calling the police and tell them, I think this is suspicious. Right. If you have a false sense of security, you're not doing that. And this is one of the problems that we're trying to eliminate right now in the schools.
Very good, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching In Depth. I'm Rick Morelli. We're here with Chief Eddie Harry and School District Vice President Vinnie Zola. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Depth. We're here discussing some of the changes going on in the Hazleton Area School District dealing with security. Before we go back into it, there's been a number of comments, and as I mentioned, and I'm going to pull up one that was on Facebook from a Sue Ann, and I'll let the viewers watch, look and see what was said, and I'll let you guys address it. Again, you saw a lot of comments out there from people. One said the teachers should be trained with firearms. I mean, your thoughts with that comment along with some of the other things you've been hearing that may not be true or may be true.
I'm against teachers being armed. That's not their job. They shouldn't have to worry about that. Our teachers should be doing the job that they were trained and hired to do, and that's educating students. And the last thing they should have to worry about is being armed and stopping a threat.
I agree with you on that. I mean, they're school teachers.
One of the things that we're looking at, one of the programs we're looking at putting in place in the very near future is to put more firearms in a school by trained people is arming security officers. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to have a police officer in the school to be armed. Security officers can undergo what's called Act 235 training, which is a Lethal Weapons Act, and they could be authorized to carry firearms. They won't have the arrest powers that police officers do, but you'll still have that extra level of security with them having firearms in the school. And I would much sooner do that than arm the teachers because, again, that's what they're trained to do. They're trained to teach. Security officers are trained to keep things secure.
Well, I think that makes sense. I mean, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different components that come into this, which is money, and that's one way to probably maximize the people you have and invest certain, train them to do dual roles. You know, you have that. But you know, talking about police, and I always tell this story, and I'm very proud of it as well. When I was on the school board, and Vinnie, you were head of security, and I was head of the security committee, and I called you up and I said, Vinnie, what is it that we need to do at this time? And you were the one who said, Rick, it's time for a police officer. And as you remember, we went out and we said, okay, we're going to go do this. And we went and said it's time, and we brought that to the board, and that was very controversial.
Oh my gosh.
How are we going to have a police officer in our schools? Is that person, police officer, going to carry a gun? And you know, I think what we were telling the public was we're being proactive here.
Right.
I mean, security was the #1 thing. And today, I don't know how many years ago that was, the Hazleton Area School District now has 15 police officers. It's the second largest police force in the greater Hazleton area. So, you know, again, that's just a perfect example of when you make change, you bring something up that's different than the system, people don't want it, but later on, down the road, you see what happens. And so, you know, that's something I'm proud of because, again, security is important. And again, whether you agree or not with any of the ideas, no one could question that what you guys are looking to do is for the benefit of the kids and the school district. But with that said, the police officers, what kind of role are they playing in the school district? How effective are they? And how are some of these changes going to take place? What's going to take place with the other schools with the police?
Let me start, and I'll turn it over to Chief Harry. When we put the first police officer on, the purpose was so that we would have consistency throughout the 13 schools in the way our students were treated. Because what was happening at that point, Rick, if you remember, every school is in a different municipality just about. So we were dealing with Freeland, McAdoo, West Hazleton, Hazleton, Butler Township. We had so many different police departments to deal with. And every police department had their own standard operating procedures. Sometimes we would call, they would have no one on duty. They were part-time departments. So they would have no one on duty to cover it. Or one municipality would arrest a student for a certain type of incident. The very same incident in another municipality, they wouldn't arrest them. So there was no consistency. And that's what we looked to do at that point. And I believe we accomplished that by having a school district police officer handling crimes within the school district. We brought it all together. Then all of a sudden, years later, they kind of threw, again, a lot of money out and put an armed police officer in every building, but no plan. There was no plan. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ed and let Eddie finish that one.
So what's the plan, Ed?
Well, one of the things we've done is redistributed our manpower. It really makes no sense to have one police officer in every building when all those buildings are different. Again, if you have a police department in a city, you distribute your police officers who are on duty based on the communities.
Right.
Okay, you have different areas of the city that may need more patrol than the other. It's the same thing with the school district. You have the high school, for example. If you have a fight at the high school, it's not just 2 kids going at it. Now you have a mob of 100 people around, and you have 1 police officer there. Yeah. And then we have a police officer in a K2 building, okay, where really the security can handle anything that happens there. You don't have the same problems. So what we've done in the last week, we've redistributed where our police officers are stationed. We brought a lot more police officers down to the high school complex where they're needed. We still have security officers in every school. That hasn't changed. But we've changed where our police officers are stationed so we can address the threats that we currently have in the schools. Even then, there isn't a school that's without a police officer assigned to it. They just may be splitting their time between 2 schools and never more than 2 schools. But we have a much greater presence where we have the majority of our problems.
Yep. With that said, what else can be done? Cameras? How people don't like to be watched, but times are changing. And again, as a father with a young son, education is important, but safety is the #1 thing. Are we doing more with cameras on the campus? And I think what you're saying before, it's fair to say, the risks are more on the campus at the high school area than you're going to find in some of the elementary schools. Are we doing more with cameras on that end?
We always, we believe in cameras. From day one, we started, and every one of our schools have cameras. Over the years, some of that equipment has been run down. It hasn't been replaced. So, Eddie's on the track of doing that. But more than cameras, it's training. And I think we need to make sure that our police officers are constantly trained, our security officers are trained, our staff, our teachers, and administrators are trained. And that hasn't happened, from what I could gather, probably in the last 3 to 4 years. Training has just been eliminated, right down to first aid and CPR training for a lot of our staff members, which is the very least that should be happening. So we've already been on that train.
Well, I think along the lines with training with the staff, I think there's something that parents have to, there's a responsibility of parents as well, of getting involved and understanding what they can do or can't do. What could the parents do in order to get a better understanding, or to, I mean, what's the school district doing to educate the parents?
Common sense on parents' part. If you walk up to a door and you ring a buzzer and they don't immediately open the door for you, don't get mad, don't get angry, don't start yelling at the secretary when you walk in. They were busy at that point maybe and didn't get to buzz you in. When they do buzz you in, if someone tailgates them, make sure that you report that to the office when you go in, that, hey, there was an individual behind me, they didn't come into the office, they may have, walked down the hall. Mm-hmm. The secretary will immediately notify the police or security in that building to go look for where this individual went. Yeah. So parents need to be a voice. More than anything, they need to be a voice. Make sure that their children aren't bringing anything into school that violates the weapons policy. Check their backpacks before they go to school, because young kids, the majority of weapons that are brought into elementary type settings because they want to show their friends. I got a pocket knife. This is the knife I used fishing this weekend. There's not a real threat behind it,
right.
But
and I think it's a fair comment. We don't have much time to talk in depth, and we can do this on another show. But talking about gangs, I think it's fair to say that there are gangs that are out there, and it's something that you could probably, I don't know how much you want or can get involved with it. But I remember a long time ago they had something here in town where they talked about gangs and educated, right, so people could get a better understanding. Chief?
Anybody that says we don't have gangs in this area are kidding themselves. Okay? Yes, we do have gangs in this area. And the schools are the extension of our community. You're not going to have gangs in our community, and it's not going to be in the school, okay? Because these same kids are going to the school. So you have that. And we also see it starting at a younger age. Mm-hmm. We have at one of our schools right now, we just try to nip in the bud, for lack of a better term, 6th graders, okay, who had gotten together, and they're not using the term gang, but that's really what it is. Okay, getting a group together, you have Group A and Group B, and now they're butting heads against each other. So again, like Vinnie said, like you alluded to, parents have to be on top of this stuff. Yeah. Okay, they can't send these kids to school and think that we are going to handle these problems. It starts with the education at home. Right. And there's so many times that we have an incident, the parents are called, oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. I didn't know my kids were doing that. I didn't know my kid had that.
That they need to look and be
correct.
Social media.
Looking at it, absolutely.
Parents have to remember that you're there to be a parent, not your child's friend.
Right.
And you have to do the parenting. And too many parents just want to, well, I'm going to be his friend, I don't want him being mad, and now they have issues in school.
Yep, I agree. Again, gentlemen, unfortunately we're out of time, but I want to thank you. When I talked to you, Vinnie, about this, one of the problems, one of the challenges is getting out to the public what goes on. I mean, we see so many times that when you make a change, the rumors fly, the information that's out there is not true, and it's inaccurate. And that's why it was important to have you come on the show and to answer some of the questions, and hopefully it did to most of the public. And again, the public also has an opportunity to come to school board meetings and ask the questions and get the facts, as well as to get more involved. So unfortunately we're out of time, but I want to thank both of you. Chief, I wish you the best in your new position here in the Hazleton School District. No question you'll do a great job, and Vinnie as well, with your background in security as well as now being on the school board. So
thank you for having us.
Yep, I wish you guys the best. I thank you for joining us, and again, I want to thank all of you for joining us here on In Depth. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great evening. Thank you.